Hi guys, and welcome to another paint tutorial on the Creatively Me with Bree channel. You guessed it, I'm Bree. Hi guys. So before we get too far into this video, I want to make sure that we are giving credit where credit is due. You see that reference photo right there? I got that off of pexels.com, and this is Skyler Ewing's work. She is a photographer and she has really beautiful photographs. Please go check out the link below in the description to go support her work. All right, jumping back in. The background I made black and then I added a blank layer, and right now I am using the cotton brush, which you can find under the organic brush library that comes with the Procreate app. Once I have my green color down, I use the Gaussian blur and I just blur out the background just a little bit. Then I go in and I add a little bit of a darker green just to make sure that there's some color variation. Once I combine the layers, I create a new layer, and then I select a slightly lighter green that I'm going to use as the forefront of the image, and I just gently tap in where I want to see those colors. Again, I'm using the cotton brush from the organic brush set that comes with the Procreate app. Once I have the colors sort of where I want them, I do go in and I layer up just a little bit more to ensure that I'm creating as much depth as possible. And then once I have the colors down, I do smudge them just slightly together, and then I use the Gaussian blur. So that way the foreground and the background now are both blurred. That's because when we go to paint the mushroom, I want the mushroom to be the focal point, and I try to paint this the way that you would sort of see if you put focus on a camera for a photograph. And when we go to paint the mushroom, the top portion of the mushroom, the cap of the mushroom, will actually be the most in focus part of this painting. Right now, I'm just tapping in small bits of a lighter green, and then again, go back to the Gaussian blur and just blur it just a little bit. And then make sure anything that stands out too much still, I use the smudge tool to help move the paint around so that nothing stands out too sharply. Once I have that done, I combine the layers and create a new layer. And now I'm creating some of the brown dirt, if you will, that bunches around the mushroom. And so I use a medium dark brown, and then I use a slightly lighter muddied brown and tap those in like I did with the greens, and then I use the Gaussian blur, and then I use the smudge tool. Again, this is actually really easy. It's a lot of replicating the same type of techniques to create this piece. I now am making the cap portion of the mushroom. Some of the colors may be a little wonky at first. We do color correct over time, but I just want to get like a base color down. So I choose this sort of golden reddish brown. And at first I was using the cotton brush to create the shape, but it just, again, it wasn't as sharp, coming through as sharply as I wanted the mushroom cap to come through. So I made sure to choose a hard edge airbrush that comes in the Procreate app with the Procreate app. And so I create a much more clean lined mushroom cap here. Next, I grab the selection tool and I use the freehand selection, and I just sort of grab areas that I think overall would benefit from just being darker to create that shadow. So that way I don't have to go in and paint it all. I'm just automatically creating some shadow, and there we go. That way I can see where the highlights, midtones, and the shadow will be on the mushroom cap. I'm still, again, going in with that cotton brush, tapping in the colors that I want. I'm trying to create a specific area with the source of light. I'm using one of those mushrooms as the reference. I'm not copying it, as diligently as some artists might. I'm just using it as a general reference guide. So that way I have an idea of how I want the highlights and shadows to come through, but I'm not necessarily stressing about whether or not it's a perfect rendition of the exact, rendering of the lighting that I see on the mushroom from the reference. A lot of this is just tapping in colors where I think it will read well. This video is edited down, so you're not seeing all the times where I put down a brush stroke and go, I don't know that it belongs there. Because I didn't want to create confusion over how this piece came together. So I just edited out any pieces that were experimental and didn't really help or go anywhere. So you're seeing the specific moves that I made that created the final product that you guys saw at the beginning of this video and in the thumbnail. So I'm just tapping in really light colors, trying to create some of that texture. Now we're going in to do the underside of the mushroom cap. And I'm painting on the underneath side of this layer. So we had the mushroom cap layer, and then I created a blank layer underneath that mushroom cap so that I could paint in this part that was unfinished. So once I have the texture of the underside of the mushroom established, I go ahead and use that selection tool again, the freehand, and then I go in and I lighten up some of those colors to create that lighting effect. Now that is still a rather harsh line despite using the feathering option. So I just go in and I use the smudge tool, and I'm using specifically the brush twig to both create those lines as well as smudge those lines. Now we're going to go in and paint the trunk, I guess. I don't know if that's the proper anatomy for a mushroom. So if you do know, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to learn. If you're still here with me, first off, thank you. That means you've made it about 50% of the way through this video. Hopefully so far you have found it helpful. If I could just take this moment to be a little bit annoying and maybe a little bit salesy and ask you to please subscribe, engage, comment, do all the things that help make it so that my channel can continue to grow and reach more people. Okay, so you've seen me use this tool a few times, but I use the selection tool, then I use freehand, and I select areas of the mushroom trunk that I feel overall need to have a major color change. Next, I go in and I use the smudge tool. I'm using a airbrush brush from the airbrush set in the library. And I'm just trying to make the colors, I don't want to say blend per se, but just have softer edges. And then I'm actually trying to slide and blend that really bright, vibrant color up the backside to create that backlighting on the opposite side of the mushroom. And in here, you'll see that I've been tapping in different colors as well as different textures, just to make sure that the colors as well as the texture of the mushroom doesn't seem too flat or too perfect, especially things in nature. Nature tends to have a lot of imperfections that are perfect, right? They're beautifully imperfect. So make sure that you're creating texture and that you're not leaving the surfaces too smooth, because then it really won't look realistic. Now that I have darkened the bottom portion of that stump, I am going in and just slowly tapping and blending with the smudge tool at the bottom to make that lighting continue to look natural. I also go into the bottom, and you saw me tap out with an eraser just a little bit of the hardened edges, and then I painted on top of the area now some, I guess you can call it moss. So I'm tapping in using, I believe right now I'm using the rainforest brush that comes in the organic brush set that comes in Procreate. And I'm just slowly tapping in the areas that I think could use some of this added detail. And like I did with the background as well as the foreground, not only am I using Gaussian blur to blur some of it so that it doesn't become the focal point, because I want the mushroom to be really the main focus. I'm also making sure that I'm building up with color. And each color I'm either smudging or I'm using the Gaussian blur to just take off some of its sharpness so it doesn't distract or detract from the mushroom cap. At this point, we're getting really close to the end of this project. We have about 5 minutes left. I just want to say, don't be surprised if this project takes you anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour. Especially if you don't like plan out how you want to execute it and you're sort of exploring and playing around, it could take quite a while to get something like this done. If you know exactly what sort of techniques you plan on implementing and you have a fairly good idea of exactly, what brushes you want to use and how to use them, this project can go by really quickly. But it can also take time. And I think it's hard sometimes when, as an audience, we're watching other people create. It can be really difficult not to feel like, why are projects taking me hours? It's only taking them 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And that's because we're editing things down. I have to literally remind myself of this when I watch other artists' content, because I can get easily discouraged and feel like, man, why are my projects taking me so long? And then when I go to record a project of my own, I'm quickly reminded of, oh, it's because I edit out a good portion of the pauses and the moments where there might be like lagging in time where I'm not doing anything or I'm observing it and I'm thinking like how I want to go forward. I might also try a few things and then decide that looks awful and I don't want to keep that. So those things get edited out unless I feel like they serve a purpose to teach or demonstrate what not to do. Or if I just particularly like one idea, but then decided just to go in another direction, but I wanted to make sure you guys saw all the different ways that I was, playing around in the app. I'm doing the final touches here. I'm really just trying to make sure that the mushroom cap gets all the love and attention since that's where majority of the eye will be drawn to, right? So because I know that the mushroom cap is the main focus, it's going to be the thing that people immediately notice. I want to make sure that I give it a lot of love and attention. And so I'm just making sure that the highlights and the shadows are as spot on as possible. And then when I feel good about where they are, I will then start to think about how can I further amplify its appearance. And so you'll see in a moment, I end up deciding to add a little bit of extra lighting in the background because I felt like it only further enhanced the subject matter and really brought the focus and attention back to the mushroom. So there's me using the lighting. So I really liked the shapes that came out from the brush. I just wanted to adjust some of the colors. And then once I have the colors and the shape, obviously I didn't have to change anything about that. The one thing I did have to change though was the composition. So I end up obviously taking down the opacity, which you just saw there, and then moving the light around just a little bit until I got it into a place that I felt like served the piece. Before it was a little bit too on the nose. It was like straight down the middle. And I just felt like the composition of it ended up feeling a little too pointed and a little too on the nose. So I wanted to make sure that I moved it just slightly. And it also, I think by moving the light just a little bit, it ended up highlighting the main portion of where the light hits anyways on that mushroom, which again, I think just further enhances the highlights and the shadow of this piece. Once I have sort of, the lighting in the background done, I just go ahead and I touch up just a few more things to really push the lighting on the mushroom cap. I'm just tapping in a little bit more texture, a little bit more to keep that focus right there. You're going to see me add some shadows. Also, I'm sure you noticed, I honestly wish that I did this a little bit less, but I just don't know if I could actually manage to do that. I zoom in and I zoom out a lot. And that's because similar to working with a traditional piece of art where you sort of step back from your work and then come back in and you work up close, then you move back. It's the same thing as working on Procreate in a digital file. You want to zoom in and you want to zoom out. You want to make sure that from a distance, everything's reading properly. I think sometimes too, it can really help you realize how much detail you don't actually have to put in because a lot of it will still translate to the eye, even from a distance. And so you can actually save yourself a lot of time and pain by zooming in and zooming out to see what details are necessary and which ones can be left out. At this point, I felt that the piece was rendered and complete. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching and hanging out with me today. I hope that you got something from this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.